and welcome to a new episode of our live program here, The Daily Debate on Nile TV International. I'm Yasmin Bakir. I'll be joining you for the next hour, and we're going to be talking about, of course, the latest incidents that took place here at the Cathedral Church in Abbasiyah district in Egypt. Of course, I would like to first, on behalf of Nile TV International, as well as the Egyptian Radio and Television Union, not only that, but even as an Egyptian, to offer our condolences to all the victims in this unfortunate terrorist attacks that took place earlier today, Sunday, near the Cathedral Church at Al Abbasiyah district, which had resulted at least 25 deaths and at least 45 injured. This is going to be one of our first segments that we're going to be talking about today. What are the outcomes, the circumstances, how our guests over the phone preview the security status in Egypt, and much more. And we're very much delighted to have joining us over the phone this evening for further analysis on today's unfortunate events. Mr. Ihab Yusuf, a security expert, thank you very much for joining us on Nile TV International, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Yasmin. It's a great honor for me to be with you and your audience.
Yes, now, of course, we woke up this morning to this very shocking event, and this is the third or fourth shockwave of such incidents that takes place in a week's time here in Egypt. If I were to ask you about how do you see what's going on here in Egypt in terms of terrorist attacks that are consecutive, ending with today's church attacks?
As you kindly said, it's a strategic situation, and everybody is really hurt in the bottom and the heart, in the bottom of the heart, because not just that it's a terrorist attack, but it's a terrorist attack that happened during prayer time for our Christians, people in the church. So it's the first time to happen in Egypt that people were attacked while they're praying. It came on the back of several attacks that happened during the last couple of days, the last of which was on Friday, that a bomb was exploded in front of a mosque. So what's happening here is that we have a mosque that have been exploded, and people died in front of a mosque during prayer time on Friday. Today, there are people who have been exposed inside the church while they're praying in the church on Sunday. Yes. And this gives a great message to the Egyptian people and to the whole universe that Egypt is, from all the sides, is facing terrorists. It's not just one segment of the society have been attacked, or it's some kind of sectarians or something. It's a fight or a war that we are taking it against terrorists, as whole Egyptians are doing together. Yes. And this will, from my point of view, will make the people get more united than before, because the people are feeling now that it's their life, it's their country that they need to protect, it's their future and their kids' future that they have to make sure that it's going to be in a safer, better future, hopefully, inshallah.
Yes, now, Mr. General Ihab, as you said, because terrorism has no religion, as we've seen, I mean, not only has these attacks occurred today on a church, on the Prophet Muhammad's birth occasion, national holiday here in Egypt, and also last Friday near a mosque as well in Giza. But many Egyptians are very much concerned. How exactly do you think the attacks occurred? I mean, the security situation is pretty tied up, and it's not the first time that Egypt witnesses such attacks. So in terms of security, they're well aware of the tactics. Yet for the explosives to be implemented, or implanted rather, inside a church, and we're talking about a 20 kilos of explosive devices, and done by a remote control outside. So it's very organized, and they know what they're doing. But I mean, how do you think this attack really took place?
There are a lot of talks now, and still it's not confirmed, but with a high percentage it will be true, that a lady came inside the church while the people are praying. She left the bag, and she went out. After that, the explosion happened. How this happened? It's a tragedy, as I told you, and it shows a lot of gaps in the security. Whether we talk about the security from the police sector or we talk about the private, as you know, and as a lot of people know, that the churches are under their private security, who's taking care of their properties. So the cathedral and the churches are under private security from their own. But this doesn't release the pressure on the Ministry of Interior, because still the Ministry of Interior is protecting the place from outside.
Yes. Mr. General Ihab Yusuf, security expert, would like to thank you very much for your insight and for your input here on Nile TV International and for joining us on the daily debate. Thank you very much for your phone call. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, of course, announced that the country will be observing a 3-day mourning following the unfortunate explosions at the church today, and he also vowed that he'll be holding accountable the assailants, and they will be put on trial to all those who have either incited, facilitated or participated in such terrorist attacks. He described Sunday's church attack as well as Friday's attacks in Giza, which had left 6 policemen dead, as part of a war against the not only the Egyptian securities that they're targeting, but and civilians, but Egyptians, the great Egyptians as a whole. Al-Azhar condemned the terrorist attack today that had occurred this morning in St. Mark Cathedral in Abbasiyah, of course, which had led to at least 25 deaths and 45 injured so far. Al-Azhar said in a statement that targeting houses of worship and the killing of the incidents are criminal acts and that they violate the Islamic principles. Al-Azhar did express their full solidarity with the Egyptian church and Egyptian Copts in the face of terrorism. To shed, of course, more further light, a further analysis on what happened today, we are joined over the phone by General Hussein Abdelrazak, who's a strategic and military expert. Good evening and thank you for joining us, Mr. General.
Good evening. Nice to be with you.
Yes. Now, sir, the attacks that have taken place today, as I've said with my previous caller, there are a shockwave of attacks, maybe the 3rd or 4th in a couple of days. Are we speaking here about a possibility of a security reevaluation, a security process reevaluation in certain areas at this very critical time?
Let me first pay my condolence and sympathy to the Egyptian people in general and to our brother, the Christian in particular, and to their families, of course. And I just would like to assure you that whatever happened, we and the Christian living in this country, one people in one country and one destiny. And talking about the security measures, of course, the security measures is not incomplete anywhere on the earth, you know. Even in the most advanced countries, in the United States and England, in France and Germany, there's always gaps, you know, because terrorists always use these gaps, you know, to go through and to carry out its attack. And we are not exception, of course.
Yes.
And as we said before, that this is a long war, is a very complicated war, and the question is whether we are ready to stand firm and to face this threat to our national security or to give up. Of course, history tells us Egypt that never give up, and whatever happened, and we are going to analyze the situation from time to time and to take the measures needed, you know, to
Mr. General Hussein,
speaking
about time here, the timing of these shockwaves of attacks, do they have any specific significant indications? I mean, we've witnessed a couple of months of here and there sort of terrorist attacks, but were very well handled by the security in Egypt, we must say. But such strong attacks that have reflected on the streets and after each other at this crucial time, does it have any message by these militants or terrorists that they're trying to deliver to Egyptians today?
Of course, terrorists, you know, always take the proper opportunity to carry out their mission, and you note that they concentrated their job in the past few months on Sinai, for example. And after they received a lot of casualties in Sinai, they moved their action to the crowd,
yes,
you know, inside Egypt. So this is the maneuver they always seeking for and carrying out. Is this is the tactic of the terrorist action, is to move very quickly from here to there, and every place is under their eyes and under their plan. And if they fail here or find difficult here, they will find another place there.
Yes, and so from here, I'm really interested to also know, I mean, as a strategic and military expert, is that kind of fight against terrorism, in a city like Cairo or any governorate very much different than the ongoing war against terrorism in an area like Sinai? I mean, do these terrorists have different tactics and do they apply different strategies when it comes to planning attacks or plotting attacks, whether on civilians or security inside a city or inside Egypt, different than what is happening currently or what they're doing currently in Sinai?
Sinai is a desert in general, you know. Sinai is not regulated as the cities in Cairo, in the valley, in Cairo, in Alexandria, and in the other cities. It's very crowded, it's very density, and of course the security measure is very difficult, and dealing with this terrorist action is very, very difficult. And we always take the measures, as we see and as we assess the situation. But the other side, I mean the terrorists, they put their eyes on some places, and if they noted that the security measure is not as it should be, and on the occasion of the birth of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Yes.
In this occasion, they always take this occasion to send a message to the inside and to the outside. The message to the inside that we can reach any place, any time, and in the way we like.
Yes.
And the other thing is to create a sort of mistrust between the people and the authority.
Yes,
which
doesn't logically happen. I mean, even in the most developed countries like France, Turkey even today had witnessed attacks. So I don't know why nobody's really, in terms of human rights and organizations and international communities, they don't care so much about, or they're not worried that much about other countries in which incidents happens. But of course, when it comes to Egypt, they're always very, very worried. I'd like to thank you very much, Mr. General Hussein Abdurazi, strategic and military expert, for joining us and for your insight here on the Daily Debate. And of course, following the attacks, the security forces today around the cathedral area in Abbasiyah district have screened the area. They've also blocked the main roads surrounding the cathedral. We've also witnessed later on in this afternoon hundreds of Muslims as well as Coptics protesters who have been gathering at the cathedral chanting against the attacks on the church, of course, in a show of both anger as well as solidarity and unity between both Christians and Muslims. Now, these statements, of course, that have come out from Al-Azhar and from the presidency have also come out of the Egyptian Coptic Papadouatris II, where he'd also expressed his condolences to the families of the victims as well as to all the Egyptian people, wishing a speedy recovery for those injured. Of course, it does come as a shock to the Egyptians because at the end of the day, every time Egypt starts going on the right path, every time Egypt's trying to revive from a fall or from a crisis, whether it's on a political level, combating terrorism at priority, on the economic crisis the country is facing, that we always have to wake with this very shocking events. However, that the Egyptian people are very different than any other Arab nations, and the Egyptian people and how united they are together at hardships is very different than any other country. So we cannot even think about such incident as a form of differences between different religions or different ethnic backgrounds. It's not like that. When we're in crisis here in Egypt, everybody stands shoulder per shoulder, and everybody tries to overcome their difficulties. We are joined over by the phone to shed more light, of course, about today's events. Mr. Freddy Al-Bayadi, who is a politician. He's also a former member of the parliament. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Hello.
Sir, do you believe that the government needs to spread more awareness about how people could deal with terrorist organizations who are manipulating and playing or brainwashing the minds of young youth, taking advantage of their, critical economic situation, playing with their minds, forcing them to do such acts of terror that results in the death of innocent lives?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to pay my condolences to all Egypt for this brutal attack that happened this morning. It affected every Egyptian, and every Egyptian family felt the sympathy to those who died and those who are injured. Speedy recovery to those who are injured now. Now, for the terrorism is a global problem now, and we in Egypt have been suffering for a long time from the terrorist attacks, and it's actually, I believe, it's not under control yet, and the measures that's taken by the government need to be revised, and there must be more awareness for the people and more measurements taken to protect the civilians and protect the military people who are under attack every now and then.
Yes, now when such incidents happen, people start to wonder, well, where is this really coming from, those militants, those terrorists? I mean, is it the Brotherhood terrorist organization? Is it foreign countries' money being invested here in Egypt for the sake of creating chaos and terrorist attacks? What is it exactly? Because it seems to be very complicated. And there seems to be a lot of enemies of this state that has, really created frictions between Egypt and anybody who does not want peace, basically, for Egypt.
Yes, this is right. It's a complicated issue, and we cannot. I cannot tell now who is the one who made this accident or who paid for it, who funded it, but. It must be several factors and several sources who feed the terrorism. So what we should do as government and as security is to take our measurements to protect our people from terrorism, because they are trying to create this fear and chaos everywhere, not only in Egypt. And I believe that there is a role from the government and from the security to raise awareness and to take the security measures enough, especially for the targets that we know ahead that there are special targets. Churches are one of the targets that the terrorists threatened before that they would attack, and they did earlier. So there are some targets. The military places, these points are easy targets, and they want to create this chaos.
My final question to you, sir. I mean, as a politician and a former member of the parliament, a lot of Egyptians are really concerned right now with how can we put an end to this? What can be done politically? Should there be more faster court rulings? Should there be more faster actual implementation of death penalties to terrorists and those dozens and dozens of terrorists who have already been held under custody and that nobody knows much about where their fate is so far? Do you think that this could possibly, apart from strengthening the security, which I'm sure, I mean, they've already been doing that kind of very hardship job for many years, maybe 5 years or more now, trying to maintain the security of the entire country. But do you think that maybe something more serious needs to be taken in order to put an end to this threat?
Yeah, one of the first measurements is the implementation of justice, and they always say that the justice like the absence of justice.
Yes.
So there must be a speeding to this process. So those who need to be sent to prison or who deserve a sentence of death, they should get it. This is one of the things that must be done. So, but it's not the only thing that we should also work on long-term education and awareness of the Egyptian people, because most of the people actually who are manipulated to commit these accidents, they are people from Egypt. They were actually manipulated because were not educated enough, or people use their poverty and their needs to use them to create such terrorist attacks.
Yes.
So there's a very great emphasis should be done actually from the government for the education. This is a long-term process, but it's really important, and it should be actually started from now, not from tomorrow.
Yes, absolutely.
To focus on the quality of education of the Egyptian people, so
absolutely.
that we avoid getting more people who can be easily manipulated and used by these terrorist organizations.
Very much agree with you. Thank you very much, Mr. Fredi Al-Bayadi, who's a politician and a former member of the parliament. Thank you very much for joining us and for your insight. Now, the second part of this episode, we're also going to be talking about the outcomes of the first follow-up meeting of the first youth conference that was held in Sharm el-Sheikh last October. This follow-up meeting took place yesterday in Cairo. It was attended by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, a number of prominent figures from different fields, and they've discussed a number of crucial files that we really need to stop and talk about each and every file very closely. Everything is interrelated, and it's a vicious circle, and it's more of a cycle that it starts all the way from education ending to economic stability. So everything is related. How can we make use of such conferences, and how can we make benefit of the youth's potentials, raise their awareness, implement or put their potentials in the right path to help develop this country and fight everything that is standing in the way or the path of its success, is what we're going to be talking about right after this short break and after a look at this report.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi attended on Saturday the first follow-up meeting in Cairo to October's first annual National Youth Conference. The Saturday event was attended by hundreds of youths and dozens of state officials. In October, over 3,000 youths from a number of the country's universities and political parties attended the first annual National Youth Conference in the Sinai resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh. The Saturday meeting was organized to follow up on the decisions made during October's conference, which included the formation of a committee to review the cases of youth prisoners for possible pardon. The participants in the meeting presented a video endorsing Egyptian former diplomat Mushira Khattab for the position of Director General of UNESCO. Earlier, President Sisi said on his Facebook account that he supported the nomination of Ambassador Mushira Khattab to the position, and he called on all Egyptians to support her. The President also presented an exceptional Youth Creativity Award to Mona Said Ibrahim, known as the Cart Girl, in recognition of her job as a cartwheeler. Last month, President Sisi received Ibrahim at the Presidential Palace after a photo circulated on social media of her on the job. The President praised her efforts and offered her family an apartment. The first panel at the event focused on ways to develop education and included speakers such as the Ministers of Education and Higher Education. During the discussion, President Sisi said Egyptians would not have accepted directing all countries' resources into improving education, as some countries did, while putting on hold all other development projects. He also said that the work done in education reform should not be contradicted by the teachings in the mosque or the church, or by the media. During the second session, President Sisi blamed the media for behaving in an irresponsible manner that jeopardizes national security. The Egyptian leader also discussed the economic situation. He said that after the 25th of January revolution, imports covered 60 to 70% of Egypt's basic needs, and this required dollars, which taxed its dollar reserves in addition to the drop in tourism and export revenues caused by the aftermath of the revolution. The president also expressed his confidence in the Egyptian people, whom he says rejected calls to take to the streets on the 11th of November in protest to the surge in prices.
لكم كل سنة وانتم طيبين.
احنا كلنا شركاء في هذا الوطن.
محدش ابدا يفرق بيننا. اتأخرنا عليكم في ترميم واصلاح اللي تم احراقه. ان شاء الله السنة دي كل اللي متأخر في قداسة البابا هيكون مصالح.
لا يليق بينا ان احنا نقول ده مصري مسلم وده مصري مسيحي. هو مصري له ما لنا وعليه ما علينا.
انا بشكرك يا قداسة البابا وبشكركم كلكم. تحيا مصر بينا كلنا، تحيا مصر بينا كلنا، تحيا مصر بينا كلنا.
Again, as we've said right before the break, we're going to be talking on the second segment on the follow-up meeting of the first annual youth conference that took place in Sharm el-Sheikh last October. And this follow-up meeting was attended by Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. First panel at the event had focused on ways to develop education here in Egypt. It included speakers from the Ministry of Education, from the Ministry of Higher Education, and many other prominent figures. The president had a vision regarding the very limited budget that Egypt is currently having, and that it wasn't appropriate at this stage for this budget to be allocated to a large extent to education rather than other development projects. And although social media had reflected that very negatively, as they usually do, but this does have a very strong meaning, and it does have a very strong indication of where is Egypt today, and how can such conference and such follow-up meetings be able to really improve the situation in Egypt by the help of the youth that constitute more than 50% of this population. We're very much delighted to have joining us here in the studio this evening to shed more light on this follow-up meeting and what his visions are regarding the different agendas and panels is Professor Ali Masoud, who's the Dean of the School of Politics and Economics at Ben Suwaif University in Egypt. Thank you very much for joining us. Good evening. Let's start by talking about your views on the outcomes of this first follow-up meeting for the National Conference for Youth.
First of all, let us emphasize something very important. This time in the modern age of Egypt, actually that the president himself actually really interested and directly engaged with youth. And this has a very big meaning. First of all, we have what we call it in economics now, demographic gift. Demographic gifts mean that a huge share of our population are youth. So if you talk about the huge population of the huge share of population are youth, then youth would be participated and engaged really seriously in all the political system and all the administrative issues in the country. So this is actually what the state of Egypt is doing now. It is really engaging youth very well.
Yes, I have to ask this question here today, of course, because of such unfortunate incidents that are taking place in Egypt, like today's terrorist attack, of course. How important is it to really allocate youth and put them in the right path, engaging them in their societies and their communities, giving them hope, guiding them appropriately? Because we see today that the most important element or tool of terrorism today is actually brainwashing these youth, using them as a tool, as a dirty tool, unfortunately, to perform all their attacks and their agendas. So such conferences, how can it overcome this criteria?
Well, actually, we feel as Egyptians very sorry and very sad about what happened today. And this is not the first time. And I hope that is going to be end soon. But this is the issue. How can youth actually get engaged? Well, actually, we are paying a price of education, the education system in Egypt now. The President Sisi in the conference said it very correctly, and this is actually what we believe in economics. Well, first of all, when you talk about forming personality, education is not providing young people by only informations and knowledge. So we're missing so much in our education system. First, yes, one part of it is knowledge and information, but the second part is skills. And the most important part, which we are completely almost missing, which is the attitude. How can you formulate
which doesn't, I mean, I'm really against the fact that when people always pinpoint to education, they're relating to schools. Well, schools are not providing good teachers. They don't have the enough budget, so the service. But I mean, education starts at home. I mean, how many parents are really paying attention to their children on all economic levels of society, whether they're the poor or leaving their children out to the streets to actually have the street teach them attitude and manners, or the middle class that's rarely not even there anymore, or even the high elite class who are busy working or, you know, having their own social life that they leave their children with nannies. So why do we have to always think of education as schools?
Yes, because education provides so many things. But you said it very correctly, actually. Yes, when you talk about personality forming or forming personalities for youth, yes, family, this is the first start, actually. The second is the education system. The third one is the religion in institution. What in the mosque, in the
and
church,
religion not from the aspect
media.
of extremism, but from unity, you know, nationalism. Where did that go?
And also the media. So, do we really have agenda?
Yes, and the president spoke about the media. He actually blamed the media for behaving in an irresponsible manner that jeopardizes the national security. And this is actually one of the very little minor times that the president really stresses on the role of the media. And it did come at a very crucial time. What do you think he meant when he mentioned that statement?
Yes, media plays a very important role now because it is very easy to get information and even changing attitudes of people through the media. Young people now in Egypt don't really read so much and don't really listen to their teachers, and many of them, they don't even are following up what is going on in the schools. Well, then the easy way to get information and to form some attitudes or public attitude is the media. So media now, it is one of the most important thing that affects youth personality.
But I mean, the media today, and especially the younger generations, and I teach at university, and I get really surprised when I ask my students to actually go and watch television channels and analyze. They don't watch television. Media is just for them Facebook, social media, Twitter, the internet, and that has no regulations, and that will never have any kind of regulations. So what are our youth facing in terms of misleading information, wrong ideologies, you know, groups on Facebook, for instance, how they attract youth and they brainwash their minds and they lead them to a very, very different side that is very, very critical. Who's responsible and what should be done in this area?
Well, as I told you just in a few minutes, you know, family is responsible, the first one. Education system is mostly responsible because the young people already are in school where they build their personality and they can have a great impact in the education system in building the personalities of youth, the media itself, and what is the actually message is going to be sent in the religious institutions, in the mosque, in the church, what these guys are going. Do we have really as a country, as a state, a comprehensive agenda towards forming our youth personality regarding social security, or national security? When you talk about national security, about the state itself, we can have disagreement, political disagreement for sure, no problem with that. But it is very hard to find a young guy can harm his country badly and he look for God to send him to the heaven. So this is why this guy gets into this buoyant. Well, something wrong in his personality in the process of forming.
Yes, and of course, I mean, that starts at a much more younger age than the youth conference age that we're talking about today. But going back again to this follow-up meeting of the youth conference, you said it's a very important step. It's the first time in Egypt's political history that actually a president would sit and have an open mind and heart to all the questions and people, youth with different ideologies, different thoughts. What is the most, or what were the most important topics that you think were discussed during this panel or during this conference?
Oh, well, first of all, it was something related also that if you look at the president's speech and talks about the talk he gave. Actually, he gave first he talked about being very open about the many challenges in foreign policies and what actually guide the Egyptian foreign policy. It talks about the economic challenges and how actually you can understand what is really going on and how can they participate actively and positively in terms of helping their country to get through this process. He actually, when you talk about the main this conference, which I really like most, is now we have young people, really they start to provide ideas to deal with the
Yes, I was very impressed with the
topics.
traffic jam, for instance. I mean, we had even the most big foreign companies trying to come to Egypt to resolve this very chronic disease called traffic jam, and they failed. So these were very simple thoughts, yet very effective. And coming out of Egyptian youth was very creative, actually.
Well, as a university professor, I deal with young people, and guess what? Well, the majority of our young people in the universities, really they like their country so much and they really want to help, but they don't know how.
Yes, their voices are not being heard.
Yes, but now when you, you find the president of the country sitting with you, then I, as the dean of a school, I really should sit with you. The president of the university should sit with you. Anywhere, anyone in anywhere. He had the matches now. The youth is very important to listen to them, to actually elevate their ideas and just their voice up.
Yes. Now, when during the conference, the president spoke about how that Egyptians would not have accepted directing all the country's resources towards education at this point as other countries did, but rather projects in the youth themselves, they were against that to a certain extent, because they said, well, from their perspective, what's the use of making huge projects and infrastructure and roads and bridges to a nation that is not culturally ready to accept how to protect and take care and appreciate this development? It's a very, very difficult equation.
Well, actually, the president, he meant in the short term. But for sure, in the long term, we are going to allocate so much resources and more resources for education. But it is about now you have a completely huge budget deficit. You have very need in infrastructure in order to attract investments and so on.
Is it really an issue of money, sir? I mean, as a dean of a university, is it really an issue of money and capabilities, or is it more of a bureaucratic system that needs to be,
about systems and
go down all the way and start up like any modern era civilized system?
Well, we still have a disease in the administrative system in Egypt, which is centralization.
We've always had a disease.
Yes, exactly.
We just don't understand when this is going to come to an end.
Centralization. You know, whenever you have a position there, you really need to look up for someone to sign and approve.
But who uses paper anymore? Everything is computerized. I mean, look at neighboring countries who have only history of 50, 60, 100 years ago, maybe at most. Everything is digitalized, everything is computerized, and people are still employed. I mean, why do they have this phobia of, oh, if I go digital, I'm going to be unemployed?
Well, this is the issue. Well, it is not only about going digital. It's about the system and law that control all the administrative levels. We have centralized country so much. So this is a very, very good needed that we should move toward decentralized a little bit system. I don't mean being decentralized system that we move all the way. No, it's just indicator moves a little bit steps and give the central some powers and the domestic areas and local level some power. So this is well, as a dean of a school, I can feel it. The centralization can be obstacle of something. As a dean, even in regional university, Benisouef University, I can tell them, well, we don't have that. Financial, it is not the major obstacle really, and by our finance to go through it. But the system, the system itself, the law itself, what is really the institutions that control all of
Yes.
that, you find yourself is blocking somehow, somewhere.
Well, with all this very much difficult barrier, and it's really annoying, the youth. I tell you that.
Yes,
I can tell you that. It's
definitely,
really annoying. I mean, the older generations, they kind of got used to it, but the younger generations, they will not be able to, you know, develop any further without overcoming this barrier of, you know, a very complicated administration. So, as a dean, do you think that maybe possibly there'll be some very innovative ideas by your students that could come up with a way of, you know, reproducing this administrative system that could make things more efficient and easy? In terms of process. I mean, nobody today wants to go and deal with any governmental institute because of that. I mean, when you want to go renew your license or do any kind of paperwork, it's like hectic for you because you know that you're going to spend weeks standing in lines, and then the employee's not there, and the papers, and then go to window 1, and then back to window 5, and then go up to the 5th floor for window 8, and it's like that everywhere. Even in universities, if you want to apply, if you want to... What kind of ideas do you think can, I mean, very primitive ideas that could overcome, on the short run, this issue until, you know, they plan some kind of long-term administration system?
Well, if I'm talking about higher education system, you really need to give more civilian, more freedom for the universities themselves in some administrative areas.
In decisions, I don't have to wait for 20 signatures.
Especially financial issues, because if you give some administrative decentralized for a dean or even the president of the university without giving him some financial freedom is gonna, you know, does not make any difference really. So this is one issue. Universities themselves needs to decide what quality of students they really have in their classes. And now, you know, people when they get our youth when they get out of the high schools, according to their grades, they distributed to some universities.
Yes, their entire fate is actually
the field they are
determined
studying.
Because of grades.
Exactly. So if you are a student and you go to school and really you don't like, but this
what
is
do you think we have in terms of education? Because education was a very important agenda on this first follow-up conference for youth. Why do you think there's this big gap between private education in general, starting all the way from kindergarten up to university, and between the public education?
What do you mean by big gap? Do you, well,
a big gap, it ranges all the way from quality of teachers and capabilities to quality of students. Because when you mentioned quality of students, the first thing that rang a bell on my mind.
Guess what? Well, if I'm talking to my hometown, Sohag, for instance, we have public schools and we have private schools. My kids in a private school, but guess what? The quality of teachers in public school is much better than in the private schools.
All right. So how do you explain this very difficult phenomena?
Well, this is what we have in public schools, the problem of overcrowded classes. The quality of teachers, believe me, in public school, in the majority of them, is really good, qualified. And in my hometown, as I said, well, I can tell you honestly that in public schools, near public schools...
No, you just come from a very lucky hometown, but I mean, I mean, going to more overpopulated governorates, I think the situation is different.
Yes, when you have overcrowded classes, this is the main difference. For sure, in the private school, they get much better service of providing.
Why I'm also asking you that, not because of the capabilities or the quality of teachers only, but when we began our conversation, we spoke about the attitude that needs to be fixed here in Egypt before education. Well, unfortunately, you do get that very different attitude difference between private schools or universities and public. And that again triggers something very alerting to what the community in Egypt has become, how it has been divided, like they live in two different worlds, or they belong to two different worlds living under the same land. And then this again triggers an alert of what will the situation be like in the next 20 years if it stays chronic as it is.
Well, actually, this is a problem. We should have a harmonized education system. We should have basics regarding private school, public school. There is a minimum level of a strategic agenda for Egypt.
Strategic agenda, I haven't heard this word in a very long time anywhere. Or, I mean, I've heard it, but I haven't seen it being implemented actually anywhere.
Because, well,
what are you suggesting?
Yes, well, when you talk about the strategic views about reforming education, they started at the Minister of Education in 2006 and 2007. They have a strategic plan to develop education system, but unfortunately, it was not put in place.
Just like anything else.
You know, but look, really, lots of Egyptian experts in education, I myself participated in forming this strategic plan. It was just delicate, and it has all the methods how to do it and all indicators.
What happened then?
But unfortunately, changing the ministry, changing the attitudes toward the strategic plan itself. But we took this strategically in somehow. So it is not that difficult as when we start to talk about strategically in 2006 and 2007, it was really difficult. Now, people in the education system get used to it, but the more challenge and the most important challenge, how to put your plans in action.
Yes. Now, another issue that was also discussed, of course, was the economic situation in Egypt, which is really getting to each and every person in Egypt. Whatever economic background you belong to, social class, you have felt this economic change.
Definitely.
The flattering economy, how has this conference helped in terms of youth ideas or suggestions to make this economy better or to accommodate to the current situation, hoping that the cycle will move forward and make it better?
Well, first, let me say, listening to youth and about and listening to their ideas, this is a good idea. This is not going to develop the country.
All right.
Yes, what develop the country is completely comprehensive vision, a plan, a strategic plan within a specific vision, actually, to develop the country, long-run vision. Okay, and this is really what is really going on and established now in Egypt. Regarding what is really going on in the economic situation, let me raise some issue, which is completely, I feel the government is not doing a good job in communicating what it is doing.
Communicating what it's doing with who?
With people, with youth. Now, as you said, everyone in the streets know that get hit somehow about this economic reform, but they didn't feel, they just summarize it and just summarize it in increasing the price. But guess what? There is miscommunication in terms of why the government is doing that and why it is doing it now. And should the government do
You mean
it or
miscommunication or lack of transparency?
I believe miscommunication is not lack of transparency. It is miscommunication. We are not.
Now, why I'm saying that is because many people believe that, well, when the government comes up and denies any decision that is going to be taken, then we see the decision happen. So we automatically know that when the government denies, then this is actually going to happen.
Well, what is happening in Egypt now, really, it should happen in 1970s. And President Sadat started, but he couldn't go through it.
Yes.
So it is really delayed. If we continue what the President Sadat did in 1970s, we would be like now our economy look like South Korea. But we didn't do it.
Yes.
But so what we're doing now is completely right, completely in the right direction.
But in the late time.
Yeah, well, you should do it even if it is late. Making it more late is going to be more difficult in the future. Let me tell you what is really going on. First of all, to develop a country or to develop a nation, you have two categories of policies you really have to follow. The first one is to stabilize your economy. Get inflation under control, get the exchange, foreign exchange market under control, financial market under control, all these indicators. without doing that, you're never gonna have your second category, which is completely reforming your economy, which is what we call it structural reform.
Yes.
So this is why I don't know if we have time to explain
We have only
that.
30 seconds, unfortunately.
Okay. So this is what we are doing now to start to calm down the economy and put it under stable. And to do that, you really have to control budget deficits and control the debt level. So this is why all of what is going on.
Yes, well, contribution and understanding, and not only just that, but also, putting a hand in actually making this country move forward, and just sitting there as a viewer waiting to see and just, nagging about everything. I think that is also very important.
Yes.
Professor Ali Masoud, the Dean of the School of Politics and Economics at Beni Suef University in Egypt, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much, dear viewers, also for joining us on the Daily Debate. Once again, we'd like to express our condolences, our deep condolences to the victims of this very, very criminal, unfortunate incident that took place today in Egypt. God bless Egypt. And let's hope that tomorrow is going to be even a much more better day. Thank you for watching.